I grew up in a little town in New Mexico, ranch country, and graduated from high school in 1941. The draft was on. All draft-eligible young men were either going off to sign up, or many of my friends joined the state guard because they thought they would be staying at home. And subsequently, that entire state guard was federalized, and the entire New Mexico Guard became the 200th Coast Artillery. He immediately went to the Philippines and were assigned to Bataan and Corregidor. Every man in that outfit, if he didn't escape, was either captured or killed. And the state lost an awful lot of young men. Many of them I was related to, or many that I knew. But I went off to college in the fall of '41 and in New Mexico State, and majored in engineering. And the war broke out, as you know, in December, and every young man wanted to go immediately. We were afraid the war would be over before we got in. I was 17, so I thought I would put in one more semester. And after a first full year, I enlisted, went down to El Paso and enlisted. I was sent to Santa Fe to be sworn in, and by train went to San Diego Navy boot camp. Had never been very far out of the ranch country, and seeing palm trees and open water was a new thing to me. We were met at the train by a very straight-backed young petty officer who ordered us to stand up straight, and he said, "Now, a few ground rules you have to know if you're going to become a sailor. You got to use the language." He says, "This is a deck. This is not the floor. These are bulkheads. These are not walls. I want to hear you using proper language." And he marched us off, and the first day or two we were involved in drawing our uniforms, learning how to wear them, and were assigned to working details.
How long and length did you stay there at San Diego before you went on?
I think it was about 12 weeks. It had been shortened from 16 weeks due to the urgency of getting the troops out to sea. And we graduated in about 12 weeks, and then were interviewed for our preferences and our qualifications of which ships they would assign us to or what kind of duty. I had a little college background, so I did well on my test scores. So they said, "We've got to take advantage of that. What would you like to be?" Well, I said, "I think I'd like to shoot the guns. I want to be gunner's mate." "No," we got lots of those. "Well, how about driving the ship or ship with the big wheel?" "No, those are called quartermasters. We got lots of those." I said, "Well, what do you want me to be?" "Well, I'm glad you asked. We want you to be an aerographer." And as I mentioned earlier, I thought, that's great. I like flying and I like photography. "Nope, son, that's a naval aviation weatherman." So that's where I was assigned. They shipped me across country in late '42 to Lakehurst, New Jersey. Off-boarded and went into the base and saw the remains of the Hindenburg we had all heard about at Lakehurst. And went through about a 2-month intensive course, and what amounted to a technician in weather forecasting. Took the observations, drew out the maps for the scientists to do the analyzing. And immediately upon graduation, the whole group was assigned. They read a list down various ships, various parts of the world. And mine said USS Copiahe. Had never heard of it. You would go to San Francisco and join your ship. In the early part of the war, there was a great shortage of aircraft carriers. Midway, we lost some. In the Coral Sea, we lost some. And the Navy decided to try a shortcut to getting some more flat tops. And they took some cargo hulls and nailed a roof on them, almost, and called it CVE, it's Carrier Escort. They became known as the Baby Flat Tops. That's the ship I was assigned to, CVE-12, which had been a cargo hull. And when I boarded it, it had just come back from Guadalcanal, where they had delivered Joe Foss and his Marine Squadron into Henderson Field. And I boarded, and the chief told me, he said, now, son, he said, you're going to be drawing flight pay, flight skins. You're part of a squadron for measuring weather conditions. And you have to put in 4 hours flying every month. If we don't have a squadron aboard, we're in port. You have to go and get the time in nearby. He says, go over to Alameda. There's a plane waiting for you. Get your 4 hours in. So the Jeep took me over to Alameda Naval Air Station, and there was my plane, the B-26, revving up. Pilot said, grab your gear and get aboard. So ran over to the little issue engine. They gave me a Mae West and a flight jacket and a parachute. He said, get aboard. The engine was revving up. So my arms were full, and I grabbed the parachute by this red carrying handle and ran for the plane. You can kind of realize what happened next when the prop wash caught that open parachute. Whole crew was watching. It was not my most memorable moment, but he said, get another chute, get aboard, and don't touch anything. So that was my first flight with the Navy. But we sailed from San Francisco, made a brief stop in Pearl Harbor, went in through the deep oil all over the harbor, wrecked ships all around. Then we're sent directly to Midway with replacement aircraft, replacement engines. The island was in bad shape after the Battle of Midway. So basically that was the beginning of about 3 years of basically supporting the Marines throughout the South Pacific. If you've seen the recent show on the Pacific War, we were at most of those islands offshore providing the aircraft support that the Marine battalions needed. Boot camp, we learned early that our primary reason for being there was to learn discipline, how to take orders, how to follow orders, and to understand the regulations. We learned a little about the Navy, ships and boats and other things, but primarily it was to teach us to become uniformed military men. We went to classes, we marched, we saw training films, and one example of learning discipline on the way back from a late movie, we got close to our barracks and a couple of sailors broke ranks and ran back to the barracks. The next morning, the entire company was punished by digging ditches on the base because 2 guys had misbehaved. We learned early that not only you, but everybody follows orders. We learned how the Navy differed from the other services in our language, in our dress, and our customs. We were taught semaphore with flags, which we never used, but it was really a learning experience, and frankly, I enjoyed it.
Was there anything about camp life, in particular, eating at the mess hall, or going to religious services, or mail call, interfacing with the other sailors that you'd like to talk about?
Well, we all lived in open bay barracks, double-deck bunks. We all marched to the chow halls. The food, about all I remember was it was edible. Wasn't anything special about it. We also learned how the dishes and the metal trays got cleaned up because we also served with mess duty and cleaning up the mess halls after the troops ate. There were a number of mandatory drills we had to learn. We had to learn the naval alphabet using semaphore flags. We essentially learned how to march, how to stay in ranks. Conveniences, we had a little post exchange, or I guess the Navy called it a Navy exchange. We never had much money or much time to go there. We did receive mail, had a mail call once a day. The petty officers in charge were reasonable people. They didn't get too tough with us, but I didn't consider it a hardship on us.
Was there entertainment provided? Was there a base theater? Did they bring in movie stars or singers or other entertainers?
Yes, we were marched to movies occasionally, and connected to that, speaking of movie stars, Henry Fonda was in the boot camp just 2 companies ahead of us. We watched him as he drilled with the rest of the sailors.
Okay, very good. Ask you a little bit too that relates to what you saw at camp, maybe a little bit different too. that was during the era in which there was segregation, black sailors and white sailors. Do you recall any of that?
We saw none of that in boot camp. There were some black troops aboard. After we went aboard ship, though, I did learn that the mess cooks, mess attendants on the ship, were primarily black sailors or Filipinos. That changed years later, but in the early days, that was the assignments for them.